Order, pardon me. With that, I'll ask Councillor Tucky to take over.
Thank you, Mayor Daniels. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the First Nations. The Mayor and Council wish to acknowledge the town of Fort Smith is located within Treaty 8 territory. Treaty 8 territory also encompasses the traditional homelands of the Salt River First Nation, Smith Landing First Nation, and the Indigenous Métis people of Fort Smith. These nations have maintained stewardship of the sacred lands throughout the generations. We honor your knowledge, teachings, traditions, and the land. We are also mindful that colonization has not been kind. We respectfully recognize our generational histories and commit to strive for unity in the spirit of truth and reconciliation. First call to order. Are there any delegations tonight? Seeing none, we'll carry on. Declaration of financial interest, statement of disclosure. Seeing none. Review the agenda for tonight's meeting. May I have a motion to accept the agenda as presented?
I'll move that we accept the agenda as presented.
I'll second that.
I believe everybody may have had a moment to review the minutes from Corporate Services Standing Committee, Tuesday, July 5th, 2022 at 7 p.m. Yes.
Yep. Fine.
Yep.
Right.
Can I have a motion to accept the minutes as presented? Okay, thank you. We're fine with that. Vision and values, strategic plan. We'll move on to governance. Ms. White.
I have no particular update on any of your strategic, of your council priorities. However, if your council has any questions about them, we did start putting them in, so I made some of them fancy.
Thank you. Economic growth.
Certainly, just give you an update. We are working, have started to advertise the position for someone to work with the town and NWT Housing on our housing study, which is going to be key to economic growth. We have to have some housing for people to move into. So that position got posted yesterday, and that person will be our liaison with NWT Housing. Or Housing NWT.
Any questions? Mayor Daniels?
Yeah, for that, once that study's done, do they have the land? Or should we be also looking for land? I don't think we have too much here left. So maybe that's something that council wants us to take a look at. Like, where do we go next? We're pretty well boxed in here, eh? So how do we solve that problem? Thanks.
Ms. White.
I think that'll be a key part of the study. We have been looking at commissioner's land that we could acquire fee simple. You're correct, there's not a whole lot left. There are some places where town land already exists, and there is some private land that people could be developing. So as we move forward and tabletop some of this, I think we'll be able to identify key places.
Thank you, Ms. White. Any further discussion? Seeing none, communication. Ms. White?
Thank you. The June newsletter went out, and we'll be sending out the list for the July newsletter. Things have been going over to the Legion sign. Our new executive assistant will be starting on Monday, and a large chunk of his work will be communication with the community on behalf of the organization and council. So you'll start to see hopefully some growth in that area.
Thank you, Ms. White. Any further discussion? Deputy Mayor Aaron.
I think one of the things that we should look at communicating with our community through the newsletter, the government of the Northwest Territories on their website has on there where you can go and look who won the tenders. Even the dollar value is there. They even have the dollar value of the people that didn't win the tender, which I don't think we need to do. But I think it would be helpful to the public to let them know who won the tenders out there and the dollar value. There's no problem with that. It's common knowledge out there, and the government of Northwest Territories does that. There's also other things that we should be adding to our newsletter, things that are of concern to the community. What is the plan for that Calder Avenue area there? I feel for those people that have that dust in their yard every day. Is there a plan of lowering the speed limit to 10 kilometers an hour? Is there any dust suppression plan for that? Same with the Riverside Road. Is there any plan for dust suppression? I know we're soon approaching the middle of summer, but the community should be aware of some of this stuff. And there should also be a section in there where people can write in their questions or use social media or whatever, and then we could use that as a way of answering concerns with the community. We were advertising the positions, and one former council member was on there asking where the magic dollars, I think he said magic dollars, where are the magic dollars for this position coming from? So, there's things out there that we have to share with the community and let them know. It is the community, and the community needs to be aware of what we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any further discussions? Seeing none, we'll move on to lands. Ms. White.
As I said, we are looking at a number of things in regards to lands. We have been working with the Department of Lands to identify places where we may wish to acquire commissioners' lands for title for fee simple. Some of that is going to be a bit more of a process because it will require some things to be resurveyed. But we're also identifying outstanding leases and that we need to update, and as well commissioners' lands with town infrastructure that we will be wanting to acquire. Certainly the commissioners does not need to own the land that the rec center is on, or the community recreation center is on. Doesn't necessarily need to own the land that the lagoon is on or the water treatment plant. So we'll be looking at having those lands transferred as well.
Thank you, Ms. White. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Human Resources, Ms. White.
Thank you. One of the projects that the Director of Corporate Services is working on is having the employee benefits program reviewed, and determining if it's the appropriate program or the best program for our organization, to get the best benefit for our employees, as well as just general human resources activities happening in the community, and looking, I guess, for magic dollars to determine whether or not we have the resources to hire a consultant and or a internal position to support human resources.
Thank you, Ms. White. And any further discussion? Deputy Mayor Aaron?
Who is involved with the hiring of the people? Who sits on the hiring committee?
Ms. White?
Each of the directors and the supervisors who are involved in a department, specifically where they might be hiring somebody, sit on the hiring committees.
Deputy Mayor Herron?
Did we not discuss in this room that we would like to get a person with HR experience involved?
Ms. White?
Yeah, that was one thing that the deputy mayor had asked for. However, there was no motion of council, so there's no direction. As well as I'm not sure where we would find the dollars for that. That's one of the things we're looking at, is to determine how best to support that, whether it's through an external consultant or a internal human resources individual.
Thank you, Ms. White. Any further discussion? Councillor Ferguson?
Thank you. Didn't we have a human resource position that we had to hire? And was there not funds available for that?
Ms. White?
No, there has not been a human resources person ever added to the org chart. It is something we're hoping to be able to do, but it does take a bit of planning and budget investigation.
Thank you, Ms. White. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Advocacy for excellence of service, Ms. White.
Thank you. And just for people who are tuning in, this is related to council's very active drive to engage with various government departments to ensure that Fort Smith is receiving the services that it deserves. So I think council's met with ITI, infrastructure, health, housing, and the college in the last couple of months. So certainly lots of work being done in that area.
Thank you, Ms. White. Any further discussion? Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you. In regards to all the meetings that we had with ITI housing, I know we had Julie Green here and other folks. I know we had addressed questions, asked questions. I know that you'd walked away with unanswered and they were going to follow up with us. Have those been addressed? Have we had those answers followed up with?
Ms. White.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I think that once we receive answers from any of those individuals or their departments, those are forwarded to council from the executive secretary. So I believe the only one we've actually heard back from was Minister Green, and the executive secretary sent that out to council. And I think it was a sort of non-answer. It was a written response with no content.
Thank you, Ms. White. Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you. I'm just wondering then if we could maybe send out a little reminder to those folks that have visited with us that, hey, we're expecting some responses from our government officials.
Ms. White.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, that actually, the executive secretary does do that. Unfortunately, it's their timeline and their responses. But yes, the executive secretary sends, reminders that we would like to hear back.
Thank you, Ms. White. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll move on to the director's report.
Thank you. I will hand that over to the Director of Corporate Services.
Okay. Thank you very much. I truly appreciate the invitation to be here again tonight. Last corporate services, I discussed revenue and where we receive our revenue. There is a flip side to that. Revenue doesn't always mean cash in the bank. Revenue is when we bill customers either for utilities, we bill for taxes, or we bill for other services. We record it as revenue. What is more important is cash received. After we send those invoices out, we receive cash in turn. So we have a general account called accounts receivable. That's a very important account. It means service rendered, but we haven't received the cash as yet. And in our last audit, in the management discussion and analysis, it hinted about issues with delinquent accounts, both basically taxes and accounts receivable. We do have mechanism for taxes. Tax delinquency can be handled quite easily. There is a prescribed process that we have to follow. And we have the means to collect taxes. Utilities bills, we have the means. There is a very robust bylaw that we can follow, and we can collect utilities. Where I think we're locked in is in the other accounts receivables, like tipping fees, recreation service, the kind of service that we render to users who promise to pay us later, and many times don't pay us. In the financial statement you receive from the auditors, there was an allowance for, we had approximately in our general accounts receivable, tax receivable, with approximately $2.5 million outstanding at the end of the year. Approximately 1.7 million was deemed allowable for doubtful account. So it's an estimate saying of the 2.5 million we have, approximately 1.7 may or may not be collectible. For our trade receivables, we had about 1.3 million outstanding, and apparently 617,000 was deemed to be doubtful. For the accounts receivable, many of these issues went back for many years, maybe all the way back to 1999. I understand dealing with accounts receivables and dealing with outstanding bills is not an easy thing to do. It's hard. And I think past personnel didn't want to deal with it. But I think we reaching a point now where, from an accounting standpoint, it's easy for me. This thing is not collectible. It doesn't meet the definition of collectible. So for example, last financial statement, the bad debt written off was $795,000. In 2020 was $423,000. But that is an accounting process. I think it is incumbent now for us to, make some tough decisions and start dealing with our standing accounts receivable. So it's okay that we can do lots of billing. It's very nice, makes us look good. It's okay that we can, charge, 24% of interest a year, makes the books look good. But if we're not collecting that money, it's basically it's going to be written off accounting wise as an expense. So that's my little chat for today. Accounts receivable, allowance for doubtful account, and bad debt expense. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Any questions? Sorry about that. Councillor Ferguson.
All right, thank you. So with you said 650,000 of doubtful, which page were you looking at?
This was the financial statement.
Yeah, I have it. I just want to know which page you're on.
So note 5. 670,000. Oh, sorry, page 12.
Okay,
So on note 4, if you look at top, it gives you how much taxes were in arrears at the end of the year. And then you can see an allowance for doubtful. So yes, you can see an allowance for doubtful account. One of the reasons why the taxes, the allowance is so high, we have about 3 accounts that doesn't quite fit the definition of what we call bad debt. I think it's more bureaucratic incident that need to be remedied, not quite through the not quite through the Property Tax Assessment Act, in the sense that it's not the ideal process to do a tax action. I think it's there are other issues going on there. The allowance for doubtful account, those are basically account that hasn't been paid over the years. And the majority of those allowances are interest and the invoices.
Ms. White?
I guess perhaps, Mr. Chair, if Councillor Ferguson would like us to just move to the briefing notes that are going to deal with these types of outstanding accounts receivable issues, we may answer some of your questions as a part of those briefing notes. And then in camera as well.
Councillor Ferguson, you good with that?
actually, I just had one more thing. Okay, we can deal with those at that time. That'll probably answer some of those. But we're thinking some of these debts that are probably unattainable because they're so whatever, probably a lot of interest. If we wanted to recover some of them, it's an option for us to say, hey, if you come pay your bill, like maybe some that are not as long standing as those, if you come pay the principal off, we'll forgive the taxes. Is that something we'll do if we can recover some of those debts?
Ms. White?
Council can't write off interest unto itself because it is public money. So we'll kind of go through that process of what we think next steps are to support getting those bills paid.
Any further questions? Seeing none, correspondence? Nothing? Okay, the accounts paid list. Councillor Ferguson?
Thank you. I see that we paid for the park installation and completion. I'm just wondering if all the parks have been completed in the new install for the equipment that's been there. Some of them look a little unfinished, so that's like with the ground around and things like that.
Talking about the playgrounds?
Correct.
Ms. White?
Yes, so finishing the installation of all the equipment has been done. We're just going to be working on finishing up the sand, and then when we have the opportunity, we will put down some fresh black dirt and do some grass growing at some point. So around all the playgrounds, around each piece of equipment, there's a required area that has to be safety surface. So each piece of equipment has its own safety border. And outside of those borders, we're going to try and touch up some of those areas with hopefully seating. But yes, everything is installed except for the slide, which was damaged, which was vandalized. That I think is supposed to come in any day now. And we have we'll be working remotely with the installer for one of our staff to install it.
Thank you, Ms. White. Any further questions on Councillor Ferguson?
Thank you. I see we made another installment to the rec progress payment, number 11. Where are we in regards to the finish date of this project, and how much is left of this budget that we're on now for this?
Ms. White?
Yeah, we're super close. Flooring in the daycare area should be starting in any day now, if it hasn't already. And we're anticipating having the daycare moved into the new daycare facility at the end of July. They're actively working on the main floor washrooms and the seniors room and the change rooms as well. So we're still anticipating an end of September completion. We may have a week or so, maybe less, where we have to shut down most of the facility to do the final bits of installation of flooring in the main foyer. But otherwise, we're cranking along there. We're still within budget, within what the budget is that currently council has allocated.
Thank you, Ms. White. Deputy Mayor Aaron?
Who's doing quality control on behalf of the town?
Ms. White?
That's a great question. Thank you. I have not secured anybody yet. That is unfortunately something that has been a challenge for me.
Thank you, Ms. White. Councillor Ferguson?
Thank you. Okay, so we are going to get someone though to make sure it's like the sign off on us for the quality control for this work, right? That's something you're looking for?
Yes, I'm hoping that our local engineer will have some time by that time to do a walkthrough with us.
Thank you, Ms. White. Any further questions? Councillor Ferguson?
Thank you. Is there not a building inspector that should be overseeing this type of work on this type of scale? Like, is there not someone from Yellowknife to come down and give us a stamp to say our electrical is good and our plumbing is sound and our floors were installed and everything is correct? Like, is there not something, some kind of mechanism in place to make sure that we're not getting swindled, you know?
Ms. White.
The only inspections that happen in regards to that sort of stuff territorially is the electrical inspection. So there is an independent electrical inspector who does electrical inspections every time they close up a wall. Or like right before they close up a wall, obviously. So we've had positive responses to those inspections. The information that we receive on those inspections has been very positive. But yeah, territorially, that's not a, perhaps related due to a lack of regulation around trades.
Thank you, Ms. White. Any further questions? Councillor Pissinger.
I guess you sort of answered my question with saying that if there's any regulations around trades, because who ensures things are properly done to code? Is there only code for electrical?
Ms. White.
So there's the Canadian Building Code applies, but there's no regulated inspectors except for the electrical and fire. Obviously, there's a fire inspection at the end.
Question, there are no longer mechanical inspections? No. Deputy Mayor Herron.
There's also regulations around gas fitting. That has to be done under a permit, as is electrical, but it is fairly standard practice that the owner of the contract has people going there and looking after that job. You don't just give somebody millions of dollars and say, go do this and allow it to go there. You have to have somebody there ensuring that the things that you require, the building codes are there, and there's certain things that just the quality of work that has to be approved by somebody on behalf of the town. It doesn't make sense having a multi-million-dollar contract. I believe what the contract worth, $3.5 million, and not having somebody inspecting this work on a regular basis on behalf of the town. That's just unheard of, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any further questions? Seeing none, we'll move on to correspondence. Ms. White. Councillor Ferguson.
Sorry, I'm just doing the math. So we're 3 months out of job completion of a $3.5 million job, and we've had no one look at our interest to make sure that the job's being done to our done well, to code.
Ms. White.
I'm not sure that this is part of accounts receivable, which is this I'm not prepared for this discussion. This is a municipal services discussion in regards to this. So I can, I don't want to give you an uninformed answer.
May I suggest then that you provide that answer at the next meeting next week? Yes. Thank you. Any further questions? Mayor Daniels?
And yeah, with the possibility of someone being there before signing off on anything on our side, like an engineer or something.
Councillor Ferguson.
Sorry, so I'm just, how many payments are left in the contract? If we're at 11, was there like where were we at with, where are we with that? And is there like with other contracts that we've had is withheld an amount of money while this process happened to ensure that it was done correctly, you know?
Ms. White.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, with every contract, large contract we have, there is a certain amount withheld from every payment. I could not tell you at this point in time what number payment we're on. When they have a substantial amount of work done, they issue for payment so that they can pay their bills. So it's not on a payment schedule necessarily, and nor is there a specific number of payments that could be applied. It's based on when they need to pay their suppliers and substantial work being done.
Thank you, Ms. White. Okay, any further questions? Moving on to correspondence. Ms. White?
Mr. Chair, as you can see, for June correspondence, we had correspondence with Mr. Archie's office as well as from Elizabeth Biscay from the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls in regards to that presentation on the action plan.
Thank you. Any questions on correspondence? Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you. Is there any outstanding correspondence that has not been addressed yet or been replied to? Everything on that we've received, we've responded to?
Ms. White?
I think the only outstanding correspondence is in regards to the DEA appointment, which I apologize. I think we had tabled that to today, hadn't we? So Mr. Vale had resigned from his role as DEA representative on behalf of the town, and council was to discuss how they would like to proceed with replacing him.
Mayor Daniels.
Yeah, the time frame on that is probably mid-August that we have before we deal with it. So we do have a little time left.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Pissinger.
So the list we have here for correspondence, that is correspondence that the town has received, right? So how about the correspondence the town sends out? Is there, so it's not included? No? Okay. Maybe that's something we can also look at. Thank you.
Ms. White?
We can certainly add a column indicating perhaps when it was responded to.
Any further questions? Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I also need direction on these water meters that been outstanding for the last 6 years. What are we gonna do with that? Are we gonna give the refund or what? I think 6 years is long enough. Some of them are seniors in that, so I'm not sure what the council is thinking there. I need direction there.
Any other comments in regards to the mayor's statement? Personally, I don't know why we're holding on to the deposits. I think they should be returned. Deputy Mayor Aaron?
Thank you. So, Mr. Mayor, what would you like us to do?
Well, I think, like the time factor in there, like after 6 months, I think with nothing happening to it, I mean, it should go back to the resident there because some of them are seniors, right? And we all know seniors don't get a heck of a lot of money nowadays, and every little money helps out. So I don't know. Those are my thoughts. I think 6 months is a pretty good trial error.
Ms. White?
Would council like us to prepare a briefing note for next week indicating or giving some examples of either what other communities are doing time-wise and or other organizations like NTPC or Northwest Tel? Would that help to formulate a path forward?
Councillor Ferguson?
Thank you. Yes, that would be helpful. I would also suggest that I don't, I also think that we should change the way in regards to the metering or the charge for this. And rather than put it for deposit for the meter, you still have folks that will get water and not pay for those. So change the way how this is, what is this classified as, or what we're calling it. Maybe it's first and last month's rent or first and last month's utility bill. Maybe it's something else if that's better than calling it maybe the meter deposit, because that means something different. If it's a deposit on a device, perhaps it needs to be a first and last month's payment or something like in lieu of. That might better serve what the purpose is of it.
Ms. White?
Yeah, we can certainly look at that. We'll have to go back and look at what our requirements are or what we're allowed to do around that, because there is, in regards to our water services, our water and sewer services, we have regulations about how we can bill and what we can bill. You know, we can't make money, we can only break even. So we'll just have to go back and see and make sure there's nothing around any of that might not fit those regulations.
Any further discussion? Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, I think it would be a good idea to explore Councillor Ferguson's idea. I like that.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Ferguson?
Thank you. And so that'll be brought up at next municipal services this as a briefing note. If you okay.
License report.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, the regular receptionist is away and did not turn over to the replacement receptionist how to do that role. So it is not included in this package.
Thank you, Ms. White. Bylaw policy review and development. Nothing there either for now. Thank you. And Ms. White, I'll hand it over to you for administration.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we have two briefing notes before you tonight. One is related to property tax, the property tax auction. Both of these are hefty notes, but I will try and summarize them. Under the Property Assessment and Taxation Act, the town is permitted to go to auction with properties that have had property taxes in arrears for more than 1 year. So what that means is that as of December 31st, 2021, anybody who's in a minimum of 1 year in arrears, their property could be put to auction. That auction would be held in 2022. Those are for 2020 taxes, just to be confusing, right? Their 2020 taxes haven't been paid by December 31st, 2021. Auction happens in 2022. The Act requires the council set the minimum auction price and the date of the auction, and then we have deadlines around that. The minimum price has to be at least 50% of the current assessed value, although council may set a higher price. And we can certainly go through when we're in camera on this briefing note, sort of how things have worked in the past to give you a sense of that. All property sales are as is without warranty or guarantee by the town. So at no point in time does the town of Fort Smith own or have in its possession any of these properties. It purely goes through a legal process. There are two ways that we can, the Property and Assessment Taxation Act, we can apply to collect our taxes in arrears, which is the tax auction and the certificate of tax arrears process. Over the last several years, we've been having very good luck with the tax auction. We had, I don't know, 40, what was the highest, Mr. Kidd, on the number of tax properties were in the auction? It's quite high. But we have had a number of, at the beginning of the process, had a number where we've had quite a number of properties that have had outstanding taxes. And if those taxes have been outstanding for quite a while because there was no enforcement action taken on those properties. So people weren't paying their taxes, and they weren't paying their taxes for quite a long time because it was 10 years between property tax auctions. Having the process yearly has been very beneficial because we've been able to bring that number down quite a bit. And right now we're not seeing any new properties. So what kind of happens is when you have not paid your property taxes, you have the opportunity to do three things. Pay your outstanding taxes when you've been given your reminding notice, come in and enter into a one-time only payment agreement. So under the Act, we can apply the payment agreement once. If you fail to make any payment on that payment agreement, it is then void. Or you do nothing and your property goes to tax auction. So as you can see, we have worked on removing for second reading bylaw to remove some of those taxes, some of those properties from the taxes. We had three properties that we removed from the from being on the tax auction list. We have sorry, I've lost my spot. We've got a number of properties currently on the list, which again, we will address in camera for the first discussion. And we have Salt River First Nation that is $492,000 for the municipal fees in lieu of taxes, or the PILT. The process requires that we undergo a number of steps to make the tax auction valid. So we have to post the arrears list in Town Hall by March 31st, 2021. That was done. April 30th, 2021, a letter is sent to the registered owners advising the properties may be auctioned if arrears are not paid. Oh, sorry, that's a typo. It should be December 31st, 2021, not 2019. July 31st, 2021, we published tax arrears list in the Gazette and News North. And then at that same time, we send a registered letter to the mortgage holders or other people with financing interest in the property, advising that the property can be sold of their registration if arrears are not paid. We then take on the next set of steps. So council must set an auction date and the minimum prices for auction at least 60 days before the auction. So today will be our first meeting about that. A letter by August 19th, a letter must be sent to the registered owners and mortgage holders advising the auction date at least 30 days prior. And again, on that date, we would publish notification in the Gazette at least 30 days, no more than 75 days before the auction. September 7th, published the first notice of auction in the News North. October 7th, published second notice in News North. And then on October 27th, we would request holding the auction. Ultimately, what happens at the auction is people come in, they bid, they make a payment on the property, a minimum payment on the property to the lawyer. The money does not come to the town of Fort Smith. It enters into the court system. The original owner of the property has 30 days to make payment to regain ownership of the property, or to retain ownership of the property. As we're moving through the process, there are costs that are incurred by the town to make sure all this happens. Those costs are also divided up amongst the properties that are on the list at the time that step is taken. So it becomes part of their bill. As per the Act, the minimum auction price is 50% of the assessed value of a property. However, council can set a higher rate. We have had some success, especially with commercial or industrial properties, at selling at 100% of the assessed value. We've had less success at that rate or that level for residential properties. Council might also consider setting a price over 100% of the assessed value should the amount of arrears exceed the appraised value of the property. However, that often makes it less likely that the property will be sold. So as I said, properties sold at auction, the funds are applied to any claim having priority. So writs or charges in favor of the federal government would have higher priority than us. The next is payment of property tax arrears and costs incurred. Any amount remaining would then be paid to the court for distribution to the mortgage holders and the property owner. So the only amount of money that we get is our arrears. We don't take in anything else from the sale, other than the fees that are required. If the sale proceeds are not sufficient to pay the property taxes arrears in full, the property owner's debt would be deemed to be satisfied by the sale, and any remaining arrears would be written off as uncollectible. That's covered in, and it's important to note that for the other 3 properties that we spoke about and we have a bylaw for, that's a required part of that forgiveness. As a part of the auction process, we don't have to have a bylaw for forgiveness. It's just an assumed forgiveness under the Cities, Towns, and Villages Act. The current year's taxes would be the responsibility of the purchaser and be paid from the sale proceeds. If a property is sold at auction, again, the owner has 30 days to pay the arrears or challenge the sale. So ultimately, council will need to go in camera for the first initial discussions around the property taxes and how you'd like to set those. And then those properties by roll number will be identified for auction. Roll numbers are public information. We have a book, a binder at the front desk that has all the property rolls and their assessed values. So council resolution must list each taxable property be offered for sale at the auction, the minimum price and any other term or condition that council wishes to apply to the sale. The date of the public auction must be set by resolution of council. Before notices of any auction can be posted, there are prescribed mandatory steps, which I've outlined, that affect the choice of a date. So we must meet these dates that we've set out in order to be able to hold the auction on October 27th. And so to meet that deadline, council would need to pass a resolution setting the date and minimum auction prices no later than July 19th, 2022. Again, a property owner could come in between now and then, between now and the date of the auction, and pay their taxes and their full arrears, and the property would come off the auction. So even if it's on the list, if an owner comes in and pays, then it comes off the list. So it is recommended that October 27th, 2022 be chosen as the date for the tax auction for properties in arrears as of 2020. It's recommended that the minimum sale price be set as the minimum auction price or the tax balance, whichever is higher. So that's a discussion you will have in camera, how you would like to set those prices. I can move on to the next briefing note, or if there are questions, Mr. Chair, for this particular one before we go in camera.
Any questions from council at this time? Councillor Ferguson. Seeing none, we can move in camera. Oh,
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I thought we might just go through the second briefing note because it also needs to go in camera. So then we can just go in camera once and that would be sufficient. So if I could move on, if it so pleases council, to the accounts receivable arrears and uncollectible.
certainly, you can move on
Okay.
with that.
So this is to provide council an update on the status of outstanding accounts receivable and to obtain direction from council as to what actions they would like to take in this matter. Again, this is a fairly, this shouldn't say draft, sorry. This is a fairly long briefing note, but I think that Mr. Kidd alluded to it very well in his report, is every year we have a number of accounts receivable and we have interest charges on those accounts receivable. And it looks like in our financial statements that we have that money and that the interest is accruing and that money is there, but it's not really because we're not collecting those accounts receivable. And so that interest is also not being accrued because the money's not actually in the bank. But when we perform a service, that is when it becomes an account receivable. Once we've invoiced it, it goes into that and it looks like revenue that's not really being generated. So for the purpose of the briefing note, we've broken up these accounts into two groups. those that are over 7 years in arrears, and those that are less than 7 years in arrears. So those that are over 7 years total $591,000 and date back as far back as 1991. They're very unlikely to be collectible in their entirety. In all cases, the amount of interest accrued on individual amounts originally invoiced is far outweighed by the amount of interest accrued. Sorry, the amount of actual, that was a poorly written sentence. The amount of actual that was actually invoiced is far outweighed by the amount of interest accrued. Quite a bit in some cases. So those are going to be there in one report that we'll show you. It is unlikely the town will be able to collect these accounts through any legal process, as the statute of limitation is 7 years. A collections agency may be engaged, but given the age of some of these accounts, this may result in an expense that's not equal to what we recover. The second set of accounts you will review are accounts receivable that are less than 7 years, but more than 3 months. These accounts total $279,000. And again, a significant portion of these receivables is interest accrued. Accounts within this time frame may still be collectible with various resources available to the town. So we could proceed with collections. We could go to court. We could continue to invoice as we are. We could look at adding things to tax bills or utility payments. Those are things we would have to explore. For new outstanding accounts, it would be appropriate to continue to invoice the individual organization, but for some of the older accounts, it may be more appropriate to add these amounts to tax bills or go through some other method of payment or collections. These accounts are detailed in the second report attached. Ambulance, tipping fees, garbage bin rentals, and various recreational fees seem to be the major components of the outstanding arrears. Our finance staff continue to send payment reminders on the accounts, but this is a time-consuming practice, which results in little to no result on a regular basis, using up staff resources that could be better focused elsewhere. For many of the older accounts, there's a lack of supporting documentation, and corporate knowledge about these accounts has been lost over the years. From current observation, it's quite possible many customers simply refuse to pay due to lack of enforcement and consequences over the years. The recent experience indicates that a lot of clients are simply choosing not to pay. Therefore, it's important to address the legacy of backlog of overdue accounts so that new accounts do not fall into this category. There are a lot of reasons why these accounts are not recoverable. Some of the citizens might be deceased. Customer may have relocated and mail has been returned with no forwarding address. A company may have gone out of business. There may have been a payment made, but it was not the exact payment of the account. And so there's some residual money that is owing that is accruing interest, and the individual may actually think that they've made full payment. There are some where efforts to collect are documented but unsuccessful. The account is just old and immaterial, or it's an administrative error and we don't have any documentation. Currently, the town does not have bylaw or policy related to managing outstanding accounts receivable, and actions taken have been limited or inconsistent over the years, depending on staff. Having appropriate bylaw and policy will allow staff to take strong and more expedient action on these accounts. This ensures that amounts owed to the town are collected, but also that residents do not become overburdened by accrued interest, making it impossible for them to pay their accounts. As the director said, the level of interest collected or applied to these accounts is actually quite high. Ideally, a bylaw would allow for strong action, such as withholding payment to individuals or companies who are completing work for the town, application of amounts to tax bills, withholding services without upfront payment. A financial policy which clearly outlines the times and steps taken in the collection process will remove any ambiguity, providing staff with clear and consistent direction. This would ensure all residents and account payers are treated equally and fairly. It would also streamline the staff response, reducing the human resource demand and lost time dealing with uncertainty. This policy sheet includes a standard as to when outstanding accounts goes to collections. 3 months is the standard across most industries and is recommended as the town standard for the town. And you can see there's a little chart here with those outstanding amounts. So older than 7 years, the actual invoiced amounts is $97,000, but with the service charges of $494,000, we have $591,000 outstanding. So you can see that the interest accrued is quite high on these accounts. So this is for council review and direction. There are some recommendations. Again, first discussion about these accounts should be conducted in camera. If council chooses to forgive accounts, it is done by bylaw, and the details of the accounts must be appended to the bylaw, so they will be public information.
Thank you, Ms. White. Any questions? Yes. Would council like to go in camera to discuss this? We have a motion to,
I'll move that we move in. Okay, I'll move that we move in camera as per section 23E, a matter still under consideration and on which council has not yet publicly announced a decision. If decision is public, would likely prejudice the municipal corporation's ability to carry out its activities or negotiations. And 23 Group 3G, and the setting of a minimum tax sale prices under the Property Assessment and Taxation Act.
thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Can I have a seconder on that motion, please? Open for discussion?